Hello and welcome back to Mark's House and Garden UK. My garage conversion project is ongoing in the background over there, but today I've got to get out into the garden and do some winter protection measures on these tree ferns, Dicksonia Antarctica. These are native to places like Australia, Tasmania. I've got 10 of these and I'm going to protect them this year in the same way as I've always done. And it always seems to work. Now these are supposed to be hardy down to -10, but because they're so expensive and valuable, I always take protection measures for the winter time. Now some people would argue that it's not necessary to do this, and other people do it in different ways to me. I'm just going to share with you my method, which is I know is a method used by other people. This is a very tall one. You can probably see in the background there's a bendy one and there's one over my right shoulder. I'm just going to demonstrate on 2 of these what I do to protect them. Let me show you what I've got together. Now this stuff I've used for 4 or 5 years. So the good news is you don't have to keep going buying new stuff every year. You can just store it. You can see this has been used before. This is insulation. It's made out of recycled glass bottles. It's not woolly. It doesn't absorb water, but it does give thermal protection. I've also got some weed fabric. Now, the stuff I used last year was nibbled by a rat, so I have bought some new weed fabric. I've got some string or garden twine, and I've also got these coffee sacks. You can see that used to be a sack. I've cut the edges off and opened it out, and you can probably guess where I'm going with this. Whilst it is true that the whole of this trunk is living and they do put roots down, the bit I need to protect is up here. The rhizome or the corm or whatever we call it, the crown, the heart of the plant, the living bit is up here. So this is the bit I'm going to protect. That bit there definitely doesn't need any protection, but this bit will do. Now, another source of debate, what do you do with the fronds? I will be leaving those fronds on, but if they get caught by frost and if they go black or brown and ugly, I'll be chopping them off because I don't like the look of them, but it's as simple as that. Some people, I know, tie them up into a tube, and there's potential there for that to give some protection, but I don't do that. I'll leave them open for now, but if they do start to go brown or black, I will be chopping them off. But as I've already said, and I'm repeating myself, it's simply aesthetics. I just don't like the look of black fronds. Now, people do argue that if you do that, it makes the crown of the tree fern close up. I've never found that to be the case, and I've always had fresh, lovely new fronds every year. Let's get on with the job of protecting them. There's one other thing that I've not mentioned, an empty bucket. There's an oak tree on the lane. I'm going to collect a load of oak leaves, and you'll see why in a moment. So the bit I'm going to protect here is from about here to about 6 inches above the crown, and I'm going to build a little wall of protection. Now, it's not going to create and generate heat, but what it should do is it should stop the extreme weather getting to the very centre, the living bit in the middle of this trunk. I'm going to put some weed fabric, breathable weed fabric, around the top first. You can also use horticultural fleece. And then I'm going to wrap it in that insulation that you've seen. And then I'm going to put the coffee sack around that. Again, the coffee sack is for one reason and one reason only: aesthetics. I just think it looks nicer. Let me go and get the stuff, then I'll show you how to do it. Now, because I've used mine before, I know it's already the right size, but essentially what you need to make sure is that each of these strips has to fit round the diameter, should I say the circumference, at least once, with a little bit of overlap. You don't want any gaps for the cold to get in. So that's already measured. I think this comes in 6-meter rolls. I buy mine from B&Q. You can also buy it off Amazon. I will put an Amazon link to this in the description box below this video. If you buy it through my link, I do get paid a commission. So just for transparency, and I do appreciate your support. So these are already cut to size. This, because it's new, isn't, So I've got my scissors there, so I'll just cut a little strip off. Because it's quite narrow, I can probably get away with scrunching it together, just going through it in one go. So there's a roll of that, which is at least the same length as these. And that's the first bit that's going to go on. Then that's going to be wrapped around, and then that on the outside. String. Now, because I'm all fingers and thumbs, I might just cut a few pieces of this string off, just so that I've got them ready. And of course, again, they need to be slightly bigger than the circumference. So I'll just cut a few pieces of this string off, and I'll just hang it up there where I can get hold of it. Every time I do this, I say the same thing. My dad used to be a butcher, and I remember him rolling the joints of meat and putting string round, and he had this technique of doing knots, and I just can't master it. I ought to ask him. So there we go. Just 2 or 3 bits of string that are easily long enough to go round with a bit of spare, just on hand up there, hanging in the tree like a little, it's a Christmas decoration, I suppose. That will go up there. I do tend to waffle when I'm doing stuff and talking. Right, let's get the protection paraphernalia and get it on the trunk. So on with the weed fabric first. I've folded it in half because I want to see if it's going to be big enough if I fold it in half. So let's just see if that works. Now the living bit, as I've already mentioned, is inside that bit there, sort of up there. So I'm thinking that is probably folded in half, gives it a double thickness, is good. So I'm going to go with that. I'm going to get a bit of string, and I'm going to, this is where I start to regret wearing gloves, because I can't do the knots with the gloves. So let's take the gloves off. Right. It's not a particularly professional presentation, this, but I suppose it does demonstrate to you that I'm always learning on the job, and basically you just got to have a go, haven't you? So this is just one piece of string for now, and all I'm doing with that one piece of string is holding that in place. I've got it slightly above the crown and slightly below the crown, and that then gives protection to that crown or rhizome. There is a name for that living bit in the middle of a tree fern, but it never springs to mind. Right, there we go. That's just holding that in place. Next is the white insulation, so let's go and get a piece of that. Again, it's going in the same position, and it's got a little bit of overlap. See? Now, as I've already mentioned, this isn't going to generate heat. It's not about that. It's about protecting extreme changes in temperature. And if there's any ambient heat in the center of that, over the course of a night, hopefully, this will just help it to retain that heat. So that piece of string which I've cut isn't quite long enough, and the other one's dropped on the floor. So I'll just hop down and get it. Of course, the string needs to be longer the more of this you apply to the outside, because of the very fact that you are adding to the diameter and therefore the circumference. There we go, that's wrapped round. Let's hope that this piece of string reaches. Slightly better, but still not long enough for my liking. So back to the drawing board. I'll get another piece of string. So now I have another piece of string, and I know it's going to reach down because I've cut it extra long this time. Let's get this wrapped round. I get on my own nerves sometimes, I have to say. I do things and I think, You idiot, why did you do that? Get there in the end, Mum. I just knocked my microphone off. Under normal circumstances, I would delete this and start again, but I'm not going to. You can have some comedy value. Right, on goes the insulation. And that piece of string is really just holding it in place. I'm now going to tightly wrap around the outside of that a coffee sack, but I'm going to cut a piece of string first. And here's the coffee sack, and all the time I'm doing this, I'm just making sure that it's above and below the central crown of the tree fern. Now this does a great job of covering up that somewhat unsightly insulation, and also when you get that on there, I'll be able to give it a bit of a tighten with the string. But for now, let's just get that one piece on. Now in the top of this, I've got like a little bowl, and you'll see what I'm going to do in a moment, because the weather can still get in there, but there is an important point I need to make, so just bear with me. I'm just going to do a bit of string tightening on the outside of this now. Right, this open bowl at the top is a slight problem because the cold air can get in there. So I'm going to go and get some oak leaves, great big bunch of oak leaves. I'm going to drop them in the top. And you don't want that to dry out, so those oak leaves will allow the water to sort of permeate through, percolate through is another word I could have used, and get into the centre of there, and it will stay damp, but it will never be sodden. You don't want it to be frozen and sodden, because that will kill it. But at the same time, you never want it to dry out. So I'm going to get some oak leaves and drop them in the top. You'll see that in a second. Now, when you do apply these oak leaves into that bowl that you've created, you need to be firm but gentle. You don't want to be pushing them down and compacting them. You don't want to be damaging those delicate fronds that may already be developing in there. So you want them to be sort of firm enough not to blow away in the first sign of any wind, but you don't want to do any damage, so be careful. Now, there's every chance that some of those will rot down over the winter and feed that crown, which is a kind of a happy coincidence, really. But the main reason for these is to allow water to percolate through, but also to apply kind of a level of insulation in the top. So let me recap. Tree fern, Dicksonia Antarctica, protect the top of it, wrap it in weed fabric or breathable fleece, then insulation. I use plastic bottles, recycled insulation because it doesn't absorb water, then a coffee sack, then oak leaves in the top. And in the springtime, that will start to grow. And then when you remove those leaves, or if it pushes them out, you'll have a lovely new tree fern for next year. If these go brown or black, I'll chop them off. I just don't like the look of them. But we've enjoyed that, found it useful, interesting, entertaining to a certain extent with all the mistakes I made in the process. But it just shows you nobody's an expert. I'm just a jobbing amateur gardener, and I think that's a good job. I'll see you soon for some more house and garden adventures. Bye for now.